If we are full, we are giving. If we are empty, we are taking. And we have higher expectations of how we need other people to behave to make us feel good because we haven't done the work for ourselves.
So you mentioned this idea of discourse being one of the signs that something's going wrong. Judgment is a huge one, right? Take the beam out of your own eye if we want to get biblical for a moment. So when you think of on the individual level, because I really try to make sure we get granular enough that people can start to see it in themselves, because like you said, see it in yourself first. What are some of the things that are happening at the individual level that helps you know, like, I have some work to do here?
If I'm listening to this podcast, and I'm like, okay, what would give me some feedback? I think it's a matter of like, what does your state feel like? Do you feel a little uneasy, unrested, a little bit like you're in the chase, of sort of proving or getting to? Or do you feel like, which is very forward thinking, like my mind, my belief system is in the future? Or do you feel guilty? There's some shame, embarrassment, some longing that is telling me that we're living in the past. And that could be my mind is there or my, spirit is there. I think that's one gut check that we can do. I think the next is awareness. Am I aware that there is thinking happening? Do I think I am one and the same with that thinking? Can I catch when I do have those judgments about myself or other people? I think that can be a signal. And I want to be careful because my gut says there's probably a lot of like high achievers, people pleasers, perfectionists that listen to this podcast because those are the folks who have the most self-help books. Okay.
Yeah. There might be one actually hosting this podcast, to be honest.
What I want to remind people is that this isn't a getting to. Like, take the pressure off of yourself of feeling like I've got to get somewhere. I've got to make it. I've got to climb. That is the achiever's game, is how do I get good at this? How do I get good at consciousness? How do I get good at accessing okay, take a breath. Much of this is unlearning. It's a remembering. That's what a lot of this consciousness stuff is how do I remember that I actually had nothing to prove? How do I go back to remembering that I'm okay as I am? How do I go? It's not a climbing to. So I think some of that, yes, check your state. Where are you? How content do you feel like you are? Where is your inner fulfillment lie? That can give us a signal that we might want to understand our ego. Do I hear or know that there is a voice within? Can I catch the judgment? What am I able to do when I have the judgment? How quickly can I get back to a place of love and compassion for myself? Those are just a couple little signals there.
Right. And that's all people need to do. Check those two boxes and then we're good to go. Right. So all you perfectionists out there, just check those. No, I'm teasing. You're absolutely right. I think there's an analogy from art that I found really powerful. And I don't remember where it's from because that's how my brain works. I just remember it. So I share it. And whoever made it up, if you're listening, please count it, call it. But it's this idea of we spend so much time thinking that our lives are a blank canvas and that we need to paint on it and add more and add more and add more until it's finished. But the problem is it will never be finished. Like the finished part of our life is death. And that's not the thing we're looking forward to. It's who we're becoming through this process and this journey of life. And so adding more is not typically the answer. Our canvas is only so big, right? We can only add so much before it just becomes a brown blob. Instead, our lives are more like, a giant brick of marble. And we are constantly trying to uncover who we truly are in the center. And so we're slowly and methodically picking away. And that really resonates with what you said, which is this idea of like undoing, unknowing, unlearning, unburdening, taking away all the things that aren't us. In fact, my process, I have a few different processes. One of my favorite quotes is all models are wrong, but some are useful, right? So take it for what it is. But one of the processes I use is space, direction, and momentum. So the first thing I do with my clients is we find space. Like we're going to stop everything. We're going to stop adding and doing, and we're just going to see where are we at, and let's take away the things that aren't serving us. And now we have some space. Now we start to look for the direction. Where do we want to go? We've unburdened us from the tools and the beliefs that no longer serve us. Now, what direction do we want to take this in? And so I agree with you strongly about this idea of unburdening or getting rid of the things that aren't serving us and unlearning things.
I think and I mean, hey, we can still learn and grow and be curious and pursue, but it isn't like we're not chasing it. There's like, it's not I gotta get here. It can just be like floating down the river, going with the flow and like, oh, this came to me. I want to read this and I'm going to explore this. And, with less of a burden on us that there is some place to be. Yeah. I think that's a reminder I have to have for myself all the time too, because my ego's MO is achiever. And so it feels like everything has to have purpose and measurement. And when I first started meditating, how do I know I'm good at it? How do I know that was a valuable meditation? How can I track my progress in learning and being a more mindful human being? And, thankfully along my path, I'm just like, oh, look at her. Look at that little, oh, look at that. She thinks she has to achieve to be lovable. Oh, where did that come from? That's interesting. Yeah. Where does she project that on the world? Like, once you realize that's just the BS game that you've built for yourself, like it can change a lot.
Yeah. But I mean, you look at, we've talked about some different religions. Look at Buddhism. It's this idea of not getting attached to outcomes, right? Disattachment is a huge lesson learned through Buddhism. And it's recognizing, like, if you want to learn for the sake of learning. Do it because you want to, and you're getting something from the process, not from the outcome. If I read this book, I'll have all the tools necessary to whatever, make $1 million, whatever the outcome is you're shooting for. It's like, no, I'm going to read this book because I want to read this book. I want to become a better father, and this book is about becoming a better father. So I'm going to become a better father. And it's not because there's some goal that if I become a better father, I'll be a better person, but just that's something that I'm interested in, and I'm willing to put in the time to learn more about it for the sake of learning.
Mm-hmm. I often use the analogy, like, make it the icing, not the cake. And that's the thing with the ego. It can be in service, but let it be the icing. Like, let achievement be the icing. It doesn't mean don't go achieve, because the scary thing, especially for achievers, is I'm so exhausted by my achievement, but I'm terrified of who I'll be if I don't have that. Because I don't want to be complacent. I don't want to be mediocre. I don't want to slow down. And yet I'm exhausted by the chase. So, okay, let it be the icing. And you're knowing and coming back into yourself, this relationship with you, this full acceptance of you, and remembering your wholeness. That is the cake. So I think that's there's, for anybody listening, if you're familiar with like Jungian principles, which are used in like DISC, PI, different assessments that use that, the 4 basis of personality or behavior. I follow the same thing in understanding our ego. And we have an assessment on the Conscious Habit website that you can go do and see what your ego's MO is. But the 4 types are the achiever. There is the person who needs praise. So do we feel as though we need the approval of other people in order to feel good about ourselves? There is the helper, which can easily turn martyr. They feel burdened with the needs of other people and that it's their job to solve them. I got to put it on my plate. It's on me. I have to make them happy. I can't say no. We all love those people, but we know that they drive themselves crazy by overly anticipating the needs of others while abandoning their own.
Sure.
And then there's the perfectionist, which is just cannot tolerate any type of mistake from themselves or other people. And so, yeah, get to know that as we go back to what I mentioned, earlier, get to know which little ego's MO do you have?
Yeah.
And maybe we have a few of them. I have a few of them. Yeah. I know I do.
Yeah. I was resonating with a couple of different ones there. And one of my good friends who's been on the show, Joe Indiano, he talks about personality assessments. He loves DISC, but he says it's a caricature. It's not it's not a picture, right? If I drew this thing called DISC, and like I'm an influencer. So big I, little d in the DISC profile. It's like it just kind of gives you a general idea, right? It does not mean that you're an achiever. Therefore, the only way you can be successful in life is to achieve, right? One of my strengths from Clifton, it's somewhere up there. Maybe I moved it from my bookshelf, but it's one of my strengths is, futuristic. So I'm always thinking about the future, but that also has its own problems because I'm never present in the moment. And so, but that doesn't mean I can't be present and in the moment. Again, it's can you be more aware of your tendencies so that when they come up, because they come up easier than maybe some other things, like I'm an achiever, but I'm not necessarily a nurturing kind of person. So if left to my own devices, I would probably go out and cheese something versus, nurturing other people and their emotions. Does that mean that either one of those is bad? No. But it's awareness, it's consciousness so that I can make different decisions when the time comes.
Yeah. Awareness is big. We can't change what we don't acknowledge. So that's always the first step.
Phenomenal. So we talked about this idea of like what's going on in the organizations and with the people that you're working with that lets you know that something's wrong. Let's flip the script. Let's look at the other half of that coin. What's going right? How do you know when somebody is doing these things well, or because you're such a great coach, what's happening at the end of your relationship with your clients that lets you know you're doing well?
Awareness is big of just knowing who I am in the moment faster. So the reaction response, it becomes more intentional. It is like, ooh, I realized they said something. It made me upset. I didn't respond to it in that way. Instead, I took a breath and I chose a more, thoughtful style of how I'm showing up. So I always get really happy when people are sharing, whether they do it naturally or they've done it through our coaching, is that they're catching themselves before they jump into the ego's response. So that's incredible. I was just in Jacksonville, Florida, a week or 2 weeks ago now. Time always flows together. But this was an internal group of women who had been selected to be a part of this 2-day summit. They had to apply and they were specially selected. And from day 1 to day 2, we came back in for day 2 and I said, what are you noticing? What's like shifted for you, or what are you paying attention to? And there was a woman who said, I don't know what's happened. I don't know how to describe it, but I do not see myself the same in the world as I did yesterday. And to me, that is this phenomenal flip of, I thought I was just watching the world and responding accordingly. And I realized that life is responding to me, not the other way around. So some of those radical shifts of awareness and ownership are big. Also learning how to regulate the nervous system. So the conscious habit framework is a combination. It's a formula that we use. It is awareness, presence, and ownership is the first part of this formula. Awareness of what's happening in my mind and body, awareness of what am I thinking of the world, what do I perceive. Presence is our ability to regulate our nervous system, because as you know, if our body is in fight or flight, our mind follows what's happening in the body. So if I'm in fight or flight, the mind goes, oh, we're in danger. Okay, let me find all of the evidence of danger. Let me find all the problems. If we are regulated, then we actually can access that, the prefrontal cortex more effectively and see more opportunity. So there's presence. The flip side of presence is also, what presence and energy am I bringing into space? Because your energy expands 8 feet from your body. Are you bringing the type of energy into a room that uplifts it or downgrades it? And then the ownership piece, all of these come together: awareness, ownership, and presence. They're not these separate things. They really happen together. Ownership is taking extreme ownership over what you can control, which is your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, your judgments. And we teach people how to break down the self-fulfilling prophecy wheel. Your belief systems influence your judgments. Your judgments are often automatic. Your judgments influence your behavior or your actions. Your actions create your results, and your results either recreate, rewire, or reconfirm your belief system. So we use that to break down, the things that are not serving us. Then the second part of this, subtract the ego. So once we have this super awareness of internal and external, the thoughts and feelings that are happening, knowing how to regulate, how to feel them, how to shift the judgment, now I can understand and subtract the ego story that might creep in. And the last part, this is where the woo feels like it's coming in, is adding in love. And love is curiosity. Love can be challenging somebody. Love can be having a, tough conversation. It can be extreme accountability for self. Love shows up in a lot of ways. And in clients that I've worked with for years, they have learned how to do this automatically, how to show up in their not getting their ego triggered, show up in a loving, place, take extreme ownership, all of those, attributes that I just mentioned. We start to see that happen more frequently, and it's pretty exciting because I know there's a ripple effect of good. I'm like, oh, good. They're going to teach their kids this stuff. As you know, I'm sure that keeps you excited about the work you're doing too, is like, they're going to go teach their children this. And then there's like this generational effect that we have on the world and being more mindful and conscious.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think this idea of legacy, like what are we leaving behind, is a powerful thing that so many people are focused on, especially my clients. They're usually doing well in their career, and they're starting to think about, what do I want to leave behind? And it's this, so many people are like, I want to leave a business, or I want to leave a legacy or a fund or something like that. And I try to remind them. One of my favorite quotes is from Pericles, very ancient philosopher, and it was, what you leave behind is not engraved in stone, but is woven into the lives of others.
Mm.
And so people aren't going to remember your name. People aren't going to remember what you said. They're not going to remember what you did, but they are going to remember how you made them feel, right? Maya Angelou said that, not me. But it's this idea of like, if I can change the way they perceive themselves enough to where they're emotionally regulated enough that they can go home and take care of their children in a little bit of a better way, maybe teach them how to emotionally regulate themselves, where does that end, right? That could change the paradigm of the entire life of that person and their kid and their kid's kid and their kid's kid. And it's not going to be, the brick, in the pavement that you bought and got your name engraved on or whatever that people remember. It's those things. And so, when you think of legacy, when I think of the work that I do, when you are doing the work that you do, those are the powerful things that are definitely going to have a ripple effect.
Yes. Let's hope so. That'd be a pretty good legacy to leave, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I could lay down on that one for sure. For sure. So you, you mentioned this idea in fitness, or I say fitness, meaning, we talk a lot about the spectrum of sickness to fitness. People who are sick, as you mentioned previously, are struggling to be aware. They're not emotionally regulating themselves. There's a lot of judgment probably of themselves and other people, because like you mentioned, whatever I see in someone else is reflected from me, which hurts myself personally, because I know that's the case for me a lot. And so, because I'm human. And so those are the sickness aspects. And the flip side is almost the exact opposite. I'm aware, I'm emotionally regulated, I'm conscious of the decisions that I'm making and the things that I'm saying, the aspects of my work that I'm doing that are affecting other people. And that can portray itself in a lot of ways. I'd love to hear a little bit more about, when you're doing the work that you're doing, how is it that you can measure or see those things? Because you mentioned like people coming and telling you. So obviously the anecdotal, like I feel it and I'm sharing it with you. What other ways are you looking at people's, growth and saying, okay, we're seeing it here?
Well, there is definitely a bigger bandwidth to handle the demands around you. With this awareness and this regulation and, understanding ego and all of that stuff as well, we learn how to give ourselves what we expect from the world. And if we are full, we are giving. If we are empty, we are taking. And we have higher expectations of how we need other people to behave to make us feel good because we haven't done the work for ourselves. So I think that, you definitely can see that people have a better bandwidth for stress or demands that come to them. They're less likely to have burnout. They are more likely, to be able to have that resilience and be able to just whatever they're dealing with, they're like, hey, I'm good. I don't even see this as a problem. I think we're also able to, tap into a higher level of creativity and problem solving because we are not in a lower level, kind of energetic, mental, physical, emotional space that we now can get to this higher level of thinking and problem solving. You have better relationships, more deep, authentic, connected relationships with each other. When you have a deeply authentic, connected relationship to yourself, you can then have that with the world around you, and you can meet people where they are again without expectation. Just seeing the humanity in them. That doesn't mean that you love the behavior of everybody. That doesn't mean that you're just like, we're all going to hold hands and sing kumbaya. But it means that when you see behavior that's out of alignment, instead of going straight to judgment, you might go to curiosity and openness. So I would say there's definitely, personal bandwidth, personal stress, there's the resilience piece, there's the relationship piece, that's happening outside of us. Those are really good telltale signs that we are doing the conscious work.
Yeah. I like your comment about not holding hands and singing kumbaya. I get a lot of clients, high achievers, right? Perfectionists. And because of that, they portray that on other people. How can you make such silly mistakes? Why don't you just do it the way I told you? Why don't you see it the way that I see it? And so much of this idea of like, I just want to control other people so that they do it the way that I do it. And one of the things is, okay, I'm asking you to see it from their side and to maybe accept them for who they are. And that's very hard for them. But one of the things I recommend is look at it this way. You can't control them. You're never going to. And so you being frustrating and holding on to that only makes you worse as a person. So if you don't want to be caring and loving and see everybody else as being great, at least be selfish enough to go, I don't feel like holding on to all of this burden of being pissed off at the world because they're not the way I am. I'm going to let it go. I'm going to not hold on to this anger, because holding on to anger is like holding on to a hot coal to try to burn somebody else, right? It's like, this isn't going to help me.
No. And I love Cory Muscara, who studied as a Buddhist monk. He's probably one of my favorite people to follow on Instagram. And then I get like the daily text messages from him. And it's always ones I look forward to, not like, oh, this guy again. But I had a text message that recently came through that said, anger is often covering up sadness. And it's easier to feel angry than it is to feel sad. It's more protective to feel angry because that is a projection on somebody else. Somebody else gets to be to blame. But when we're sad, it's an emotion we have to really sit with. So anyhow, I love all of the stuff that he happens to share on his page. I highly recommend checking him out.
Absolutely. What was his name again?
Cory Muscara.
Okay. Yeah, I'll check him out. I love getting daily texts, but sometimes the texts are a little too salesy for me. So
this is straight, just good wisdom. And I
love it.
I often will be like, let me forward that to some clients, because I feel like we were just talking about that. There's definitely a wave of consciousness that we hit. I think that wisdom, I'll go off on a tangent here. I think that wisdom is not something that comes from our own minds, although our egos would love for us to think like, I'm so wise because I am the smartest in the land. Wisdom is an energy that we are able to connect to as we, clear the space and get rid of the shit. And we're doing, we're moving our bodies and we're, meditating and all of that stuff. And what I've recognized, it's very interesting, the patterns that begin to emerge is that when you're kind of on this energetic state, that more wisdom is brought your way, that it just perfectly lines up with every freaking conversation that I have. Like it's a really interesting, it's like tuning into your, favorite TV station. Like, all right, I'm tuned in. Now give me all the wisdom everybody needs to hear this week that I'm going to be talking to, like clockwork. It happens.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that there's a lot of opportunities that I've had that when I've been open to things, all of a sudden things are reaffirming, right? Like, oh, I just literally heard about this book, and now somebody's telling me about it, and oh, it's something that I need in this right exact moment. Whether you want to call it
Hmm.
karma, the universe, or whatever. I think there's also a piece to it of. I'll usually try to share this with clients if they're probably not a good fit for me, by saying, I can't fill a glass that's already full. And
Mm.
so it's this idea of like, somebody comes to me and I need your help, but I'm going to tell you all the things that I need help with. I'm going to tell you all the ways that it's worked and hasn't worked. And I'm going to tell you exactly what I need from you in order to, and it's like, okay, it's hard to fill a glass that's already full. And so similar with wisdom, right? If I already think I know everything, I'm not open to new possibilities. And
Hmm.
therefore I'm probably not going to receive that radio station that
Yeah, it's
I
a great
need so
analogy.
desperately.
Yeah,
So
it's really good.
it's phenomenal. So we talked a little bit about this idea of the attributes that we're looking for, being more open, being more connected, better relationships. You and I shared kind of before hopping on that all of our dimensions of our wellness are interconnected. You talk about mind, body, spirit. I talk about physical,
Hmm.
mental, spiritual, emotional, and the other pieces as well. And so there's no separation of it. And that's what we've talked a lot about here today. And so I'd love to hear as we start to reach our closing time. What are some of the habits that you have recommended to other people that you would recommend now to help people start to become better at being conscious about their own emotional regulations and the other aspects of their life?
I encourage everybody, this is part of coaching that I do with people too, is you have to figure out your formula for feeling good. And I cannot tell you what that is. It is a discovery for you. And this formula for feeling good, it really should be, I hate to should on people, but it like a combination of mind, body, spirit activities. And that formula becomes your non-negotiable because it allows you to put yourself in the state spiritually, physically, and mentally so that you can create more awareness. You are able to create a bigger gap between reaction and response because the less we have that for ourselves, the more holes essentially we haven't filled ourselves energetically, physically, mentally, right, on all of those planes. But I can give you some examples of what they might look like.
Hmm.
So a being practice to me is what allows that mind, body, spirit connection to really happen. So what are your being practices? That could be meditation. Meditation has so many forms. There is mindfulness meditation, which is like visualization or listening to guided meditation. Present moment awareness is essentially mindfulness meditation. How do I bring my mind back to this moment? There's mantra based meditation. And so some people may have heard of TM. It's really popular. I think Jerry Seinfeld has talked about how he's practiced TM for 40 years. This is where you typically would get a teacher. They assigned a mantra to you specifically that becomes so sacred that you never write it down or share it with anybody.
Hmm.
And you learn how to meditate twice a day. Some sort of practice in that mindfulness, meditation, breath work, etc. If that feels uncomfortable for you, I think recognize that because if being feels uncomfortable, I think just sit with that discomfort and ask it questions. Why is this uncomfortable? Is there a story I have wrapped around it? Like I'm being lazy, I need to be doing something.
Hmm.
Um, Sometimes, not sometimes the ego can get involved and it tries to keep us distracted. So, you know, let it be uncomfortable. You could do walking meditations where you just choose not to take your phone or you just choose to have it put away somewhere and you are just creating some awareness and, noticing what's around you. I think journaling can be a really powerful practice for people as well. It's a chance to get all of the crap in our minds out onto paper. So whether it's, a practice of writing out anything that we're worried about so we can get it out and we can see it more clearly. There's lots of exercises you can do on that and the reframing, whether it is as if journaling, if you are using it as a place to help rewire your mind to possibility, whether it is question and answer journaling, you feel stuck. And so you write a question and you allow your subconscious, or for you, maybe it's spirit to give the answers through. That's something. Move your body. What are you doing to move your body and get the energy moving? Connect with your people, but figure out your formula for feeling good. Mine, can I tell you? Mine are like,
Please, yes.
and if I don't have them, I can tell because I am just not, I don't like myself as much.
Sure. Yeah.
Mine are meditation. So some form of meditation, and my practice has evolved to where I'm like, ooh, this is what I need today. So it's always, it could be something different daily. It is some form of moving my body. And then it's contribution. So how was I able to provide some kind of contribution today? That is my formula for feeling good. And if those things are off, I'm a little off.
I love that. That aligns a lot with some of the practices that I have, which we won't get into today, but very powerful habits to start to think about. I also love your comment of like, if you're uncomfortable with the idea of being, sit with that a little bit. Like if I said the statement, I am, and just left it there, if you're constantly trying to like, what are you? What is, how do you finish that sentence? We have some things to work on. We should be able to just speak the words, I am, and that be enough, because it is like, you are enough. So I like that idea of, if that's uncomfortable, start to do some searching there. Or find somebody to search with. I'm biased. You're probably biased in the idea that everybody should have a coach. But if this type of work is hard for you, I have like 4 coaches for different aspects of my life, because it's not the world that I live in. If my car breaks down, I want a mechanic, because that's the world that they live in. So, find a trusted friend or mentor, advisor, a coach, whatever, to help you with that. I think is really powerful too. You don't have to go on your own, but.
Yes. Tribe. We all need it. We all need it. It's required on this journey.
Absolutely. So that's a habit. So that's for the doers out there, for the thinkers, for the people who like to ponder, to dive a little deeper, to do the research. What kind of book or resource would you recommend that they look into?
Ooh, I have so many. I can share one that I remember changed my life, was The Untethered Soul. And I have recommended that to people when they are in certain areas of their life, that shares the concept of this inner roommate. Much like that participant last week who said, or 2 weeks ago, whatever the time warp is, who said, I see things differently than I did yesterday. I was driving down the highway when I was listening to this book on audio, and I remember having like the world shifted, and suddenly I could see the world from the inside out instead of the outside in. So that one has been so impactful for me as a human. And then I'll just throw an extra one in. If like meditation and mindfulness is brand new for you, I really appreciate Emily Fletcher, who I learned how to meditate from. She's been on my podcast, and she wrote a book called Stress Less, Accomplish More. And it really is, meditation for high achievers, and how to learn the value of doing nothing. So there's some great data in that book that she shares.
Absolutely. That's great. So, Amy, how do people learn more about you? Where do they go to listen to the wonderful things you have to say, to hear more about the work that you're doing? How do they find out more?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So the podcast is wherever you listen to podcasts, whatever your jam is, right? Our website is theconscioushabit.com, and you can find that assessment, as I mentioned, on the website there. And then I'm most active on LinkedIn. So would be, you can follow me on LinkedIn under Amy Woodall.
Sure. Absolutely. That's why we're sitting here today, right? LinkedIn's a wonderful platform for connecting to people. So that's great.
Gotta love
Amy
it.
Woodall, thank you so much for the gifts that you're giving the world. I appreciate you for just being you, but also for the wonderful things that you do.
Thank you. I'm so grateful to have spent this time with you.
Absolutely.